Good evening, friends. Karma here with Lewis Acre Farm, doing my final video for the Survival Seeds 2024 collaboration. And this has been one crazy year for me. It's been a year of learning. Nothing was the same for me. Everything had to be moved from an in-ground garden to raised beds. It had to be moved from its original location into our yard. I transitioned to self-watering raised beds for almost all of our raised beds. Plus, I was having to learn how to garden with morning sun, afternoon shade, evening sun for most of the beds. Some of the beds also had evening shade, and that proved to be quite a challenge because we still had intense heat even though we had shade, and it was challenging. Learning what plants grow best in which beds has been really difficult. Tomatoes didn't even begin to ripen until late September. My cucumbers are just now starting to grow. The plant grew, but the fruit didn't start to grow until about a week ago, and we're already getting into the low to mid 30s at night. I don't know that we've had a freeze yet, but we are getting into the lower to mid 30s, and so I'm baffled why my cucumbers never produced during the summer. But I was successful growing basil and thyme, and I did have one of my garlic chives survive. My onions grew, but they didn't bulb. My squash, I had beautiful plants, but very little fruit. And I was successful growing sunflowers. I've never been able to grow sunflowers before, but yeah, it's been interesting. So I'll show you what's left of my garden and just kind of go from there, tell you a little bit about what I've learned as we go. So that is my thyme, and I grew that from a dollar store herb rocket, and it's been really successful. I even started that really late, and now I just got to learn how to use thyme. So that's kind of fun. I grew my first head of cabbage, and it has been absolutely delicious. This head of cabbage here did not produce a head, actually. It might still. It's looking healthier now than it did through the summer. There is my cucumber, and this is a Richmond green apple cucumber. And you can see one of the fruit right there. There's several little ones throughout the plant. Oh, there's a nice big one right there. This is a variety that I've never grown before, so I'm really curious to try it. I think it's going to be a fun variety. I have fairy tale eggplant there in the corner, and that is a cardinal basil, and that one is so delicious, absolutely fantastic. I think that's one of my favorite varieties of basil. And I still have one red potato to dig. This was an interesting plant. I haven't used all the fruit from it yet, but this is a mango melon or a vine peach, and it produces small, round yellow fruit. And to me, it tasted similar to a cross between a cucumber and a zucchini. And I still need to try using that yet. So that's going to be fun to do. This is my white patty pan or scallop squash. It has been very prolific. I started it kind of late in the summer after all of my peas were done and all of my turnip and Yukon Gold potatoes were done in this bed. I have 3 plants here, and they have been very prolific. I still have a few squash trying to grow, and they're really, really delicious squash. Easy to grow. I've really enjoyed those. Some of my winter garlic coming up in this tub. This is my okra, and I have 4 different varieties that I tried growing. This bed here has Aunt Hattie's red okra on the left, and then the other side is Benoist okra, and that one is a really late one for us. But we've had a few pieces of it, and it is by far one of our favorites. These 2 here have been our favorite. The red okra is not very slimy at all. The Benoist is extremely sweet, but it is a little bit slimier when you eat it raw. Logan and I enjoy eating okra fresh from the garden. We just pick it and eat it. It doesn't ever get a chance to be cooked. And then the Stuart Zabest okra never did come up, but this one is emerald okra. And after trying the Aunt Hattie's red, we have definitely decided that this is not the okra for us. It is definitely, when you're eating it raw, the way that we do, it is slimy compared to the others, and it doesn't have the full-on flavor that the other varieties have. So it will not be making a comeback once we finish using up the seeds that we have. Then this bed had our beets, this not the Detroit red beets, but it had the albino beets, the golden beets, and the ruby queen beets, and those did fairly well, but I had a really hard time keeping these beds watered because they're not self-watering, and they received a lot more sun than any of the other beds. And I have my grow bags that I got from Walmart. They're just shopping bags that I use to put sweet potatoes in, and I'll be harvesting those pretty soon. But I had carrots, 2 different kinds of carrots, and those did pretty well. But again, keeping them watered was a challenge. Now this here is a squash that I was finally successful with this year, and I'm super excited to try it. It's called pineapple squash, and if you harvest it when it's young, you can use it like a summer squash, or you can let it grow and mature and use it as a winter squash. But that's the first squash that actually was able to grow to any size, and I have one more over on this side. Looks like the bugs got to that one, so I doubt I leave that one on the vine. But this was a tomato that I had a terrible time keeping watered. It's a mystery what variety it is, but it's a very delicious tomato. I just couldn't keep it watered enough for the tomatoes to mature and to grow to any size. The tomatoes that I did get off of it were misshapen, and they were very, very small. They had good flavor, but they just were way too small and very misshapen. My cauliflower, I could not keep it wet, so it did not do anything. Except for take up space that I could have used for something else. My onions, some of them got some good size to it, but they just did not bulb. And I think a lot of that has to do with the soil. It has to do with water and heat. We had a very long stretch of 100+ degree temperatures and not cooling off at night. I think that really affected most of the crops that were stuck in direct sun the majority of the day. But then again, this tub here retained moisture a lot better, and those onions did not bulb either, but they did get some size to them. They were in with the kale. That is my scarlet kale, and it grew beautifully. Unfortunately, due to my schedule, I wasn't able to do anything with my kale. The scarlet kale has a really good flavor to it, and my goal was to make kale chips with it, and I never did get that done. I still have some time to harvest some of it and do just that. I hope I get to do it. Growing it in this tub actually prevented a lot of the problems I had when I was growing it in the ground. In the ground, I found that I had a lot of the same thing I see on my cauliflower, which is like little bugs and I don't know if that's aphids or just what it is, but I would get the same exact thing on my kale. And so the kale ended up being unusable without a lot of scrubbing. And I haven't seen that on the kale this year. Or if it is on there, it's very minimal. So I'm happy to have these tubs to grow in. This is my chive tub, and this is the garlic chives right here, and oh, are they delicious. They're real small, but they're sure delicious. When they get a little bit bigger than next year, then we'll be able to really harvest them and cook with them. This and the other two is my garlic, and I should be able to harvest that in the spring. I'm looking forward to that. This bed over here doesn't look very good right now. It's definitely reaching the end of its growing cycle. But this is my purple potted pole beans, and we really enjoy these. They grow these long purple pods, and you cook them just like a green bean. And you know when they're ready to harvest, when they turn purple. They can have a little bit of green on them, but you don't usually wait till they're this big. I chose to let them stay on the vines so that I would have seed for next year. I've had an awful lot of help with my garden this year, and not the kind of help that I really wanted with the 4 kittens. But they struggled at first to produce or even to grow at first. But then they finally started coming on and producing. We had several nice little messes of green beans to eat, and they're a really sweet variety. I did get a few marigolds to mature enough to produce, and this is the first time I've actually been successful getting flowers to grow and mature and bloom. I was not successful with my lettuce. That's as big as my lettuce grew this year, which normally I have beautiful, beautiful crops of lettuce. My zucchini, however, I grow a variety called Costata Romanesco, and wow, I had 3 plants. One of them finally fizzled and I pulled it, but these 2 have just been growing like gangbusters, and they produced very early and quite a few zucchini for me. And they don't produce your traditional smooth zucchini for you. They produce a bumpy, kind of crooked fruit. There's one that you can see. And it's been consistent, but not like constant overrunning me with zucchini. But you can see how huge it got. And the more you pick, the more that you get. And it's been a fun adventure to finally be able to be successful with my zucchini. They've absolutely loved the raised bed. And I used my tomato cages. I just opened them up and put them there for trellises, and it's been very successful. I learned a lot about tomatoes and what not to do. I had so many tomato plants, and I didn't want that many, but I definitely learned do not put more than 1 tomato plant per raised bed, or they will cross-pollinate, especially if they're not the same variety. This is my black cherry tomato, and it's normally really, really prolific, and I have cherry tomatoes real early. As you can see, they're just now really coming on. And next to that is my Amish paste tomato, and I've only gotten about 3 tomatoes that ripened so far. It's a very, very, very late plant to mature as far as putting out tomatoes. At least it was this year. One thing that I did discover is that they have a very thin skin. Once they start to ripen, they ripen quickly. And they also go bad quickly. So that's not favorable as far as I'm concerned. I need something that's going to keep a little bit longer than what the Amish paste tomato does. They do produce very nice, large tomatoes. Very sizable. You could use them as slicers if you wanted to. This is my pepper plant that I overwintered, buried in here somewhere, and it was more prolific this year than I've ever had it be. I still have a pepper on it. trying to grow, and it still has blossoms, and it's about time to dig it and put it in the house. It's got more peppers right there trying to grow. And then I have a couple of pepper plants right here that produced. They're supposed to be a grand bell pepper, but this one produced a single bell pepper, and this one produced long, yellow, hot, very hot peppers. And they came from the same packet. I don't know what's up with that. This was a new type of eggplant that I grew from seed, and they are just coming into maturity. Be the first ones. See, 2 of them are ripe, and 1 of them is still green. It comes from Africa, and it's going to be interesting. Out of all the blossoms that are on it, those are the only 3 that had time to develop into an eggplant and mature. But this one is another one that I grew from seed, and this is similar to the fairy tale eggplant. They're supposed to get to about 7 inches, and I got 3 that reached almost that length. I don't know if this one's going to have time to get full sized, but I haven't cooked them yet. I need to do that in the next day or 2, and I'm going to be making eggplant parmesan. And then this is my other pepper, and this one was supposed to be a bell shape, and it turned out to be really long horn-shaped peppers with a really amazing flavor. And I have no idea why my peppers that I grew from seed did not turn out to be what they were supposed to be, but it was a fun experiment, and I am happy with it, and I'm going to try to overwinter my peppers again, because you definitely get much larger fruit in the 2nd or 3rd year than you get in the 1st year. So that was fun to experiment with. I've already pulled some of my squash. There's one of my sunflowers, and this was supposed to be something. I can't remember now, but I'm growing garlic in here as well. This was my acorn, and I have pulled a lot of the vine already that wasn't producing, so that the fruit would have time to mature, and the plant wasn't trying to put all of its energy into vine that wasn't producing. And the fruit that I got nasty squash bugs all over it. Not good. I have never had squash bugs until this year. This is the first year I've ever had squash bugs, and I've grown squash every year. It's been frustrating. But I got several very small acorn squash, and it's still trying to produce a couple on here. My acorn squash was so huge, it was growing over onto the other side of the raised bed. It was all the way out here into the yard, clear over, trying to grow into this raised bed. It was everywhere. It was a jungle. I had to be very careful walking through here to get to the water spout to fill the raised bed. It was fun to watch, but it was a challenge. And these are my sunflowers, and I'm getting so excited to harvest those. They're getting close. They're getting really close to being able to be harvested. This is called a honey nut butternut squash, and it was really late getting in the ground and growing. It struggled really bad. But I got one little bitty tiny honey nut butternut squash. Yeah, we'll try it. We'll each get a little taste of it. And it's been kind of fun to watch it grow, and I'm looking forward to growing it again next year. Now for the plants that you've all been waiting for the Survival Seeds 2024, this is my Mariana tomato plant. I could not get a ripe tomato for anything. I could not get it to ripen. Nothing I did, keeping it watered, and I watered it. I had to, because I know you're supposed to, tomatoes don't like wet feet. At least that's what I've been told. But I'm telling you, this poor thing was struggling, and if I didn't give it water, well, I had to. I had to keep it wet. The wetter I kept it, the better it liked it. With the hot temperatures we were experiencing, it's the only thing I could do. And then I was told, pick some of the green tomatoes and put them in the house to ripen. And it worked. As soon as I picked, probably 8 to 10 of the tomatoes, then I started to see a few of the tomatoes start to ripen. But I'm telling you, it's one of the slowest ripening tomatoes I've seen, aside from the Amish paste. And I ended up with 2 of the Mariana tomatoes, and I put the other one on this end, and I left it outside of a cage and just gave it a stick to grow on, and I think it did better without a cage and just a natural support than it did with a cage. The tomatoes weren't as bunched up, and it had more air circulating. The light was able to get to the tomatoes better. Overall, I think it does better with a natural support than it does with a cage. I see I have another tomato that's getting close to being ready to be picked. My Waltham squash did not make it, but I did have a butternut squash that I was working on growing. I ended up with one very small baby butternut squash. That plant didn't make it. I was growing those in this tub here. I had a branch of my cherry tomato break off, and I ended up putting it over here. Just stuck it in the ground, and you can see it took off. It's very happy here. I had my beets over here, and the Detroit red beets did very, very well. I ended up with about 5 or 6 beets that survived. The Walla Walla onions did not do well. They didn't even make it past sprout. But I did buy some seeds to try in the spring, and I will be trying those in the spring. I've already harvested a long time ago the one kidney bean plant that came up, and this is my second kidney bean. I've already harvested part of the seeds, and I see I have about 3-4 more pods to go, and I'll be harvesting those here very shortly. I think I ended up with about 1/3 of a cup of beans, and I definitely will be saving at least part of them, if not all of them, for next year. And I will be starting those much earlier in the season. We get hot pretty quick. We go from winter almost directly into summer once it starts warming up. And so I have a very short window in the spring for growing cool weather crops. And then they turn our irrigation off. October 7th. So I can't even have a fall garden. So that limits what I can grow in the fall, and I don't get to have a cool weather crop the way that I had hoped I would. Normally we stay hot, pretty hot, up through at least mid-September, if not clear through September before we start cooling off. The evenings get a little cool, but daytime stays pretty warm. So I have a lot to learn with my new growing situation. I did have more sweet potatoes that I grew. I had 3 tubs of sweet potatoes that are growing. I think I needed to start my sweet potatoes a lot earlier. They didn't have much time to grow. The sweet potatoes that I have harvested have been. I did grow quite a few red potatoes. Most of those were pretty small. I've never grown potatoes before, and I tried that this year. One thing I did learn is that I cannot grow sweet potatoes in my self-watering raised beds because there is a weed mat in there, and the vine tried to grow below the weed mat, and there's no way I got the whole vine pulled when I was digging those sweet potatoes out of that raised bed. I know I didn't get the whole thing. So who knows what's going to grow in the cucumber bed next year. It's going to be interesting. So, really, I guess that's most of my garden. I did have watermelon, sugar baby watermelon, and Tommy apple melon, which is a type of, I guess, cantaloupe, growing. I had a cabbage over here. It didn't amount to anything, but it actually looks like it's trying to come back. Watermelon didn't do too bad, but it was so late getting planted, it didn't have much chance to really mature. And then the last thing that I did grow was my loofah, and I ended up with 3 mature loofahs. We did harvest one that was small enough that we could try eating it because it is edible if you harvest it small enough. And we tried eating it, and it was really pretty good. It was different, very different, but it was pretty good. So that is my garden. I learned a lot. I know that seed starting was a disaster for me this year, and I learned so much. I learned that I cannot wait till when the seed packets tell me to start. I have to start my seeds much earlier. I can't start them in the house. I have to start them out in my greenhouse because I didn't have success until I started in the greenhouse. I learned I need a much bigger greenhouse than what I have if I'm going to start as many seeds as what I started this year. How am I going to use all these tomatoes? Good question. I don't have a canning book. I don't have a whole lot of jars. I do have a water bath canner finally, but I don't have a pressure canner. So I'm limited on what I can do as far as preservation. I would like to make more green tomato jam, so that's where a lot of these green tomatoes will go, but it only takes 2 pounds of tomatoes to make the green tomato jam, a single batch. I want to make ketchup, and I would like to make some salsa for my son. He eats a lot of salsa, and he likes hot things, so that's one thing I would like to do, if I can. I'm not sure how I'm going to use all those tomatoes, but that's the majority of what I've been able to harvest this year. My harvest was not good. It's been such a poor harvest year for me. The biggest thing is learning what to plant where for next year. Figuring out what's going to grow best in our lighting situation. So what would I add to next year? I think that I would add winter squash, maybe a different variety, one that's a little sweeter, that's a little bit more versatile. Maybe include some recipes on ways to use it. Or, I don't know. But I think that if people have an aversion to squash because they've only been given basic ways to cook, and there's so many fun different ways to cook squash, different ways to cook beans. There's different ways to make beets. Beets are a good source of vitamins and nutrition, and you can use the whole plant, perhaps including other vegetables that are fast growing, and you can use the whole plant. Might be good. Turnips are a good thing. I used to think that I wouldn't like turnips until my mother-in-law had some on hand, and she sliced them up for us for a snack, and we just had them raw, dipped in ranch dressing. I didn't think I would like them, but you can use the whole plant. Turnip greens cooked are highly nutritious and make a good side dish. And you can also use the root. That's another option that could be added to next year. So, there's a lot of different choices, different things that we could do for next year. But anyway, that's what I learned. That's what I would suggest. And I want to thank the Vineyard Chicks, Bushcraft family, and Jesse and Lisa for an amazing growing year. And I can't hardly wait for next year. I'm disappointed that the growing season has come to an end. I hate having to tear my garden apart and pack it in for the year. But now I guess I get to start planning next year. So thank you again, and I'll see you next year. Bye, guys.